We're going to begin Chapter 8, Displaying and Annotating Profiles, which continues after Chapter 7 on our profile learning, which we got into the nitty-gritty of profiles. This chapter, Chapter 8, is going to reflect very similarly what we did in Chapter 6 after we learned about the geometry of alignments. So with that being said, once again, let's go to our book, which I opened up on Chapter 8, beginning on page 149. We're going to talk about the beginning here. Much as we learned in Chapter 6 about geometry and designing alignments, the same with profiles. Designing them is only half the battle. Annotating them, giving the geometric shapes and all the listings of what makes that wavy line on our profile view takes as much time, if often sometimes more or equal amounts of time, to display it properly on grid lines and to give it a nice grid annotation underneath the profile and in your profile view to make it look the way we want and control what information we want to see. That's very quick to pop to a contractor or reviewer or anyone who's building our items. So in this chapter we're going to learn about changing the display of profiles and the profile styles, which control them as any Civil 3D style. This is yet another Civil 3D objects we're learning is a profile view. And beyond that, we're going to continue with that and learn about configuring profile views using profile view styles. So that is how we're going to change how they look. And we're going to continue to share information along the bottom of a profile and a profile view on the bands on the bottom and the information we can use for that said manipulation. Further, the part 4 of this chapter, we're going to add detail using profile labels on the profile views themselves and on the profiles, which leads us into profile label sets. Much like alignment label sets, they come in label groups. They work and act together. They're unique that way. And then we're going to learn about additional profile view labels that work and act independently on their own, standalone labels, similar to what we did with alignments and other types of Civil 3D annotative, dynamically changing labels. And lastly, we're going to look at projecting objects onto our profile view, which will usually have an elevation, then they'll show up in the vertical, say a feature line or a pipe network, which we'll do later. And that will be it on that. So let's continue on with this chapter and move into our exercises. On to the next page, on page 150. We're going to start by messing with our profile styles to begin on this. Let's go AutoCAD drawing. I have Civil 3D 2022 open again. I'm going to start with profile styles. I have them numerically numbered, of course, to help me out to move quicker. And I'm going to get organized to go on this one. So similar to the last couple chapters, this chapter is going to stay mostly in one model space view, which is definitely helpful for the speed of your Civil 3D instead of having multiple viewport configurations in the view ribbon tab and viewport configuration, multiple model viewports panel. So most of our work is going to be in the profile view as we learn how to do different styles, labels, and various other things. So that being said, too, different profiles have different purposes. So one shows design, one shows existing ground sampling, and on the profile view we have different information too. So going back to a little quick review from chapter 7, I want to talk about profiles a little bit more. Let's go to a different file where some of the labels are in. That might not be the best one. Let me try just one more. This one has some more labels. So this has some of the vertical curve stuff going on. I don't really love how this has thick white. It's hard to see visually here. You can turn your line weights here on and off. It doesn't really affect much because our line weights are pretty thin on our tool tray here. So talking more about profiles and vertical curves, let's talk about them a little bit more. We talked about the length of vertical curve, which is from here to here, It's actually a straight line. It's not actually the curve. I might have misspoken on the last video. And we have our beginning stationing and beginning elevation and our end stationing and elevation. We have different types of curves in here. Many of them are parabolic or asymmetrically parabolic, and we can go and see what that means in a minute. Some of them are circular. We have our low point. This is all the information here is talking about this, is really concentrating on this PI point, the theoretical tangents of where the curve, the vertical curve would both intersect. It's station elevation, and generally it's usually, if you hover here, it's usually the low point or close to it. The low point's usually right there. Depends on where the curve is. The curve could be shooting up a different way. I'll show you some photos in a second here, but its station elevation holds the same. The K value is the abruptness of the curve, or you could say the higher the K value factor or ratio, the more gentle and generally safer the vertical curve is in a highway for design, for things like headlight and sight distances. So the smaller the K value in converse is expressing a more abrupt vertical curve, more aggressive and almost like a straight line shift, which is not easy to drive over, if you could imagine, with wheels. So let's go to some images here to talk a little bit more about that. We have some vertical curves here. I'm not going to go into detail between these type 1 and 2, but they have a different slope going in and out. They definitely go on a rise a little different. Most of our curves are going to look more like this, the type 1 crest vertical curves. They're going to come in and make a more mounding shape. Let's go instead of in a vertical or downhill. And here's just some more review on profile curves in the vertical. So say a car's driving here. Here's your point, your PVI here, your PVI here. So this is coming into the curve, because generally profile views start over here. They read left to right, like most views. So this would be the PVC. It's a PVI, but it's the point of vertical curvature. Actually, no, I'm misspoken. This is the grade coming in. This is the percentage of grade of this straight tangent. Here's the PVC. That's where the curve starts, the vertical curve. Here's the PVT, point of vertical tangency, where it turns back to a straight line. This is just the grade going out. This is in the uphill. This is the grade coming in the up and the downhill. Here's a sag curve or a valley. And here's a car. This is kind of visualizing what the minimal headlight sight distance would look like. Here's the sag curve length in the horizontal. It's like a chord bearing in a way across an arc. Here's our PI, point of intersection. So this is some of the stuff we're seeing on those labels, which we're going to get familiar with in a second. This is a little deeper here. We don't need to worry about it, the different angles and headlights and variables of a car. We'll go to the next one on a crest curve. This is on the top of a hill, not on the valley. Similar. Minimum stopping distance is what it would be called, though, because you can't see an object up over a hill, okay? And it's similar. Crest curve length is just this point to this point, straight line. It's not actually the curve. That's more dictated by the radius. If we make a bigger radius, this curve gets wider. And also the length, of course, correspondingly gets wider. But we can control these in our Civil 3D, as we just saw at the end of Chapter 7, one of these at a time. Here's our grade coming in and going out. Anyway, that helps you visualize some of these a little bit. And this is a little more mathematical, which I won't go into, but the K value is basically, as we've said, it is a way of expressing the abruptness of a vertical curve. So how crazy tight it is to a point, whether it's in the crest, the top, or a sag on the bottom, is expressed in K. It's a function of G1 minus G2, but with LC on top of it. So it's a function of this variable divided by this variable minus this variable equals the K. So this is how we can do that. There's another way to see it here with the variable C. Well, actually, this is the exact same thing, just different annotation. Okay. End of the story on this. Here's some other variables we won't talk about, some yada yada yada. Another layout of a vertical curve, your grade going out, your grade going in, some datum to somewhere, probably could be any datum really. It's land surveying related. The back tangent is going this direction. You're porting a vertical intersection, forward tangents this way. This stuff won't be on your test necessarily, but it helps you visualize and learn these, especially the labeling. Anyway, so let's go back here and we select this profile here. I'm deep in this file, and one will go later in this chapter, but I'm going to edit the geometry by right-clicking, going here, or I could go here once again. And let's take a look deeper at what type of curves these are on this view. Go to Profile Grid View here. So it says what types of curves they are, okay? And they're not asymmetric because they don't have two different lengths. I'm actually curious. So we do have some design parameters not met. Go here. I'm just checking one of these at a time. It just says it's a sag curve. It doesn't say if it's asymmetric or symmetric or circular. Just checking on that. So we got our stats of our curves. Just looking at that a little bit. Most of those of these, if I'm not mistaken, are parabolic curves. I'm pretty sure of that. This is usually the best one. They're not shaped like a circular object. They're usually shaped parabolic, and sometimes you can have a free vertical curve that's usually parabolic. It fits amongst points to go parabolic. There's an asymmetrical parabolic, so it has two different curves. Circular is just a little more round topped. It's not as advantageous of a geometry for profiles. So asymmetrics, I haven't made too many of them, but if you go into our profile again, and I'll go into, this time right click and go to edit profile geometry, you can see there's some stats. I still got to go into the grid view here. There's some stats on the different asymmetric lengths, so you can stretch the legs of your parabolic curve in two different lengths here. I'm not going to go into that here. We'd have to design it like that from the beginning. Anyway, some background. So to go back to Profile Styles, File 1 here. Okay, let's continue to check out the Jordan Court profile view. We're going to click the red existing profile, and then we're going to click the profile properties in the ribbon. It's up here. Contextual ribbon here. It comes up in blue just for this Jordan Court profile. And we're going to go to the information tab in the profile properties and change the style to no display. We're going to turn this one off for a minute. I'm going to hit OK. The profile disappears. That's okay. That's what we wanted in this exact exercise. So using styles like this has an advantage. A lot of times it's nice to have a Civil 3D style that turns something off temporarily. It has advantages to turning layers on and off. First, many Civil 3D objects have multiple components that can be displayed on different layers. So they're like onions. They have layers within them. So you can't just turn off one layer and turn off what you need. There could be 5 or 6 layers that make up a Civil 3D object. Changing one style like I did, it's amazing how many users don't know how to use this. Not trying to make a joke on that, really. Just, it's easier oftentimes just to turn them off temporarily than to freeze them with some of this stuff. It's easier and quicker to control the visibility oftentimes to change it to a no display style. So just remember that for a lot of things. It's still in the drawing, of course. Alignment, center line, Jordan Court, center line. Here's the one I turned off. So these get populated slowly under here. This is the one I just turned off. It's still here. But if I go to properties in this regard, this is what I just did. I turned it on a no display Civil 3D style. So it's still in the drawing, just on a different style that doesn't appear. So let's clear the selection, and then let's select the black design profile for Jordan Court, or white in a way, and right click, or we can go to profile properties up here in the ribbon. Let's change its style this time from design profile to layout profile. can see some of these. I'll hit apply. You can see it, a preview there if you're zoomed out far enough. So different colors are showing up, different grips are showing up. Let's get a little closer so you can really see it, and I'll do that again. So different colors are showing up, blues and whites, and different markers are showing up on the profile. So let's go into that one last time on the end of page 151. Right click, and I'll go into this a different method now through that menu, and we'll go to a different profile style. I'm going to hit apply. While I'm in here, you can see how it's more of a basic look. Okay. Symbologies, line types, layers, markers, various things are changing when I change these. We're going to change it to one more, design profile with markers, hit apply. And this is the style as example how you might say represent a profile in a final drawing. It displays lines and curves. It has a little more prettiness, and the line extensions as dashes. It shows some PIs in a certain way. So let's get out of here, and I'll hit escape, and I'll show you what it looks like. This might be a more refined, final looking profile because it's showing a lot of things you want to see, but some in gray, some in black. The markers help things pop to where the geometry is stopping and starting. This isn't a bad one to have. I might consider using this at a different company, just so these markers really pop where your geometry is starting and stopping. The Prospector tab, we're going to go Prospector in here, into alignments, Jordan Court, I do believe. Yep. And we're going to go into Jordan Court EGCL, existing ground center line, and we're going to right click properties this way to get you in that direction. And we're going to change the style in this pathway. We went a slightly different way. Let's change it back to existing ground. So a lot of existing mapping would be on some kind of existing layer, something that distinguishes it and makes it look dashed, or something distinguished from the design or proposed or new, design proposed new. I'm talking about the same thing there more or less, over what is existing ground. You want them to be differentiated in a lot of these situations. This would be a common one, existing between proposed. Okay, so that's it for this one. We're going to the next file for profile view styles. So we're going to start with that. Styles are, of course, very important with profiles, but even more so important with profile views because they potentially really dramatically affect how this whole thing is presented, this whole view. Its grids, its tick lines, its layers, how it line types, how the whole thing is displayed. It's a pretty critical style to dial in at a company, and we're going to see that here. I don't like all their styles in here. I've worked at places that they have really good ones I like. Some are okay, but you can really dial them to your needs. And a lot of times I've had a lot of different clients, and these views can be very, very client specific. So let's click on the Jordan profile view here to start, and let's right click and go to profile view properties. In this case, we're gonna look at some things in the major minor grids. So we want to change the style from major grids 10V to major and minor grids 10. And I'm going to move this a little to the side so you can see. I'm going to hit apply to change it while we're in here. A little hard to look at that one, but that's what it wants. So let's just change to one more for fun. These ones have horizontal geometry points. They signal, where this curve here on the alignment starts matches where it matches on the profile. This helps us merge vertical with horizontal as we flip this alignment 90 degrees in the Z dimension or elevation dimension. We can see better. This helps us with designing where our vertical curves are matching our horizontal curves over here. Okay, so there's different styles for different applications. Some of them are more in the vertical exaggeration, so this is the Y direction, the elevation. These oftentimes are exaggerated in the vertical or stretched. A 10 times vertical exaggeration would be stretched 10 times with respect to the y-axis, the stations, excuse me, the x-axis. The x-axis normally stays 1 to 1, usually stays true, 1 foot equals 1 foot, okay? But the z-axis a lot of times on profile views, most times, is the one that gets exaggerated. So they can be stretched. If it was 1 to 1 vertical exaggeration, 1 vertical equals 1 horizontal, 1 to 1, then there would be no exaggeration. But a lot of these are stretched. So this one's at no exaggeration. It's a lot flatter, see? Horizontal and vertical match. This is at a 5 exaggeration. It stretches 5 times more in the vertical or the Y. Now we're at 10. It stretches even more, doubles again. So we're going to go to this view here, major and minor grids 10V. Not my favorite one. It's kind of hard to look at with all the white. And a lot of additional grids here, but these might have a certain way they plot, which we like. So let's select the profile view grid and change the style to major grids. We could also do it here. I have it selected. And leave my properties open. We're going to change it to, what do they want? Major grids 5V. That's a lot better. So you can see how drastically everything changes depending on which profile view style I have. The vertical exaggeration, like I've said before, is reduced to 5 on this one. It makes the profile, of course, feel much flatter. And lastly, we'll bring it down to 1, like I was saying before. It makes it so there's no exaggeration, very flat. So the flatter the earth that you're doing these on, the more you probably have to do exaggeration to really get it to show graphically some significance in elevation change. If it's a steep mountainside, you might not need to. So it's okay to exaggerate depending on your needs, to show high highs and low lows, steeper slopes in between. But the shallower or the flatter the earth you're going across, you might need to exaggerate it more, and that's okay. The picture on 154 shows that pretty well side by side right here. So it just kind of shows the same representation. They're the same length in the X dimension, but you can see in the Y, this one goes up 5 times, this one goes up yet again 2 times. And a lot of times you see the scales assigned to one drawing, so one represents the horizontal, one's the vertical. That's typical of these. Usually most of our drawings, the scale's the scale. 1 inch equals 5 feet. It's like that across the board. But these profile views, you got to indicate your vertical exaggeration sometimes, so you don't trick people into thinking this is a huge elevation. You got to tell them you exaggerated it for display purposes. So that's it on that explanation. We'll go here again and change the profile view one more time to dot. This is an example of how the graphical standards of a client or maybe a review agency, they can be exactly built to your Civil 3D standard styles, making it easy to meet the requirements of others. So for example, I do a lot of drawings for Northwest Energy and other Montana utility companies. They want them to look a very certain way. The first time, it takes you a while to get them to plot and look just like theirs and mimic theirs sometimes, unless they give you a good Civil 3D drawing. Oftentimes they don't. Once you got one dialed in, it's easy to just switch to the style. As you saw here, I just went and changed it, and it completely changes it to the one I want. So once you get them set up, they're pretty automated. That's the beauty of them. We're going to move to page 155, exercise 8.3. I'm going to go to that now. Profile view bands. We're going to add some information on the bottoms and the sides. So let's click on the Jordan Court profile view again. And then we'll click on the profile view properties and the contextual ribbon up here. Let me restart that. I clicked the Jordan view profile, Give it a second. It's going a little slow for me right now. I just zoomed in a little bit. Let me try this again. Give it a minute to think. Oh, I went into, sorry, yeah, I was making a mistake. I was messing with the profile properties. I have the profile view selected. That's easy to do. I sometimes forget that. When I have the view selected, the grid, you got to go over here to profile view, properties, and view style. Don't accidentally go to the profile properties and style. That is the lines here. They're two separate things, but they're side by side. So let's do that again. I was tricking myself out there. And we'll go into here. And we can change it this way as well, of course. So we were doing that in the properties box here earlier, which was great. But we're going to go back to major and minor grids 10V, apply, hit OK. We changed that. Let's go back into there again. I shouldn't have left. And let's go back, say you never left, go to the bands tab. And under the band style, we're going to choose stations and elevations. Right here. And we're going to say that's the style. And we're going to go to add. You can have a lot of different things in these. Add this down here. And we're simply going to follow the directions. It gets a little deep here on step 6 on 155. It's going to say make sure in this geometry points to label band dialog box. Make sure this is on, which it should be. Make sure we have Jordan Court profile existing ground center line is profile 1. Leave all this stuff to label and hit OK. Okay. So let's slide this out a little bit. It gets a little tricky. Like so. Let's remove or move it on the top header. We want to be able to see profile 1 and 2. This is the key. So we have our bands going on. These are the key informations on this one. So those are minor and majors, which labels to show the gap, band type, elevations, yes, elevations and stations really on the bottom. That's pretty typical on the bottom of profiles, see elevations and stations. This one, let's expand out a bit. So what his parent alignment is. Essentially what we're going to do, we're going to add information for profile 2 to a different profile. So we have two profiles going on. Click it and change it. So that's an important one. We have two bits of information going on with stations and elevations. They're going to display simultaneously. We can hit apply. That's getting applied there. We'll hit OK. And across the bottom of the profile view, there's now a band that labels the stations and elevations at even increments, as we see here. And we have two different elevations, which is good. That's what we want. Elevation 1 is existing ground. Elevation 2 here is finished ground. We can see the difference. Someone could easily say, oh, okay, here's my station. Oh, here's my difference. I have a little bit of fill here because my design elevation is higher than my existing. It means it's a fill condition. Earth needs to be brought over, or material, or whatever. But they're very close to the same elevations. As you can see, they're almost touching all the way, which is conducive to what we have here. Most of the time it is almost touching. Here it's getting to be a little bit of cut and fill over a foot and 2 feet. Okay, so we made a band. Pretty neat. We're going to go into it again. Click the profile view and select profile view properties from the ribbon again. Pull down and go here, or you can just select this icon up here. Give it a second while it opens it up. we're back into the bands area, the bands tab. We're going to select horizontal geometry this time instead of profile data. So last time we just assumed with the profile data at the beginning is all we did is the band type. Didn't really even mention that, but this time I will emphasize this. In this case, our style of the band is going to be geometry, and we're going to click add this time. This time we don't have two different profiles. And right after step 11, you could have clicked save this band set. So let's say I want this on all my profile views later. You can quickly import it to a blank one, because this will be blank on your next profile view, which is down to the south here. Let's just save it, showing you how it's very similar to the alignment label sets. I'll call it my favorite band. No, not Motley Crue or anything like that, but my favorite profile bands. Okay. And that's on there. Let's hit apply. That shows up down here. I'll hit OK to leave here. Apply took the change though. And let's return the drawing. The new band is a graphical representation of the alignment geometry. So upward bumps, this is kind of neat. And the band represent curves to the right. And downward bumps represent curves to the left. Okay, so this is a curve to the left. This is a curve to the right. This is where that reverse curve is. It gives us, on top of our vertical data, on the profile and its stationing, it's corresponding horizontal data. That's pretty cool. It gives the line, curves, and the curve to the top is to the right. So if we go here, this curve, so we're starting this station 0, 0. This curve's going. It curves to the left. It's a little hard to see. We'd almost have to flip this around. It might be easier to see if I go like this. Rotate it that way. A little easier to see. So we're going this direction, it curves that way. And then it curves that way, which is to the right. And then we're going around and around up this alignment, and it curves to the right. So that helps you visualize that a little bit. Rotate with my view cube. So that's representing, this means it's going to the left, this means it's going to the right. Most of ours are going to the right. But this is our horizontal information, the length and radius in the horizontal, not the vertical. This is our length in the horizontal. It doesn't give the bearing here, but I'm sure there's a way to do that. That's pretty cool. So it merges horizontal with vertical data on top of itself, which can be useful for depending on what the client wants to see, or yourself as a designer. Last but not least, in this section 3, we'll remove a band quick. Let's say we have too much information. This might just help us. We might want to turn it on and off briefly as a band set. Here, I just saved this one. So I'll go into here, into Profile View Properties. I'll go to Bands. Remember the one I just saved? Well, let's import it. I called it Aaron Windels' favorite bands. Possibly the Black Keys. Hit OK. There we go. So I added it quickly here without having to do that manually. Anyway, there's ways you can make this look the way you want as well. That's just the way this style is of this band. I'm going to go into this one real quick to end this the chapter section. Go back to the Profile View Properties. And I'm going to pick just the horizontal geometry in this case. And you can also put them up and down. So let's move this so you can see it. I'll apply it. They can get stacked in different orders. And they can also be deleted. I'm going to delete this one now, this red X. Hit apply to see that before I leave. But now I'll hit OK because I'm done with this part. We're going to start getting into profile labels, file 4 here. And on page 157, let's talk about them. They're similar to alignment labels in that they can show up along an entire profile, its range, its significant geometry, wherever they encounter things that are supposed to be labeled. If a vertical curve label is applied to a profile, let's say vertical curve labels will appear where these are. We're going to see those in a second. Another advantage, these labels appear whenever new geometries are added. So once a whole label set's added, they act dynamically. If we're working on a really long stretch of highway or canal with a whole bunch of curves or whatever, it's nice when they repopulate automatically instead of having to delete them. When you add a vertical curve, let's add another one here, they will disappear and delete automatically at times too. So let's dive into chapter 8.4, and I'm going to click on our favorite Jordan Court FGCL again, and then we're going to start going into the labels. Edit profile labels in the ribbon. This one has a slightly different ribbon. I'm picking the profile view. It has our labels over here. This one keeps them a little more separated. There's less than alignment labels. They only have a couple standalone ones, station, elevation, and depth, but this is our main one. These are our profile labels that come in a big group, similar to our alignment ones. They're very similar. So if you got this in alignments, you're going to get this quick here. We're going to select crest curves as the type first, and then we're going to select, let's see, crest only for profile, crest curve label style. That's a mouthful. But this is the style of we're going to just do crest curves in this case. We're going to do add. There's ways to add way more things here, but we're just going to do these. Okay. Or we can just hit apply. We see we added the crest curves, the top curves. We didn't add anything else. It didn't add the sag ones and the valleys, just the crest ones. And that's why I want to talk about these labels and what's on them. They're a little more complex at the beginning of this chapter. Here they showed up. The beginning of the vertical curve here. Let me hit regenerate to make the curvature come again. Sometimes you have to type in regenerate or regen all to get AutoCAD to go kick it in the butt a little bit graphically. This one's kind of in a very upward slant, upward gradient to enter. And here's its point of vertical curvature. Goes around its PVI to its PVT, point of vertical tangency, and its length of vertical curve, its K value. It's not a bad K value. It's a somewhat gentle, not too abrupt slope. And this is the stats on this PVI here. Up in here, the station elevation high point. Anyway, that does that. We're going to go back to editing labels by clicking the profile again. We'll say edit profile labels. And this time let's add 3 more, which is on the kind of mauve or brown, whatever color that is. There's 3 of them. We're going to add sag curves. Do these one at a time. There's better ways to do this, but we're trying to just kind of learn more. Sag only on this one. Let's add it. Lines. This gives the percent grades of the lines of the profile. You'll see in a second. And lastly, grade breaks, where there's PIs. Straight line is straight line. We're going to go grade breaks. These are all very typical things to be labeled on and station elevations are style of that label. Hit apply. Here they come. Hit OK. Zoom in to the third curve label from the left. So from the left, 1, 2, 3. You can kind of see it didn't grip. They never always come in the perfect spot, but we grab this curve label of the profile view that has grips. This one will move it upwards so it's more readable. There we go. And we applied all these labels to the entire stationing of this whole profile. You can do it for specific stationings. We didn't have a need to do that. So the end of this chapter is just saying there's some grips here. This one brings it in the drag state. This one just drags it up and down. And these profile vertical alignment sag curve label groups, or these, I'll just call them profile labels, styles, and labels. They have very specific appearances, so you can do a lot of customization on how these appear. Here's our line grades. This is going the uphill. Remember, because we read profiles from the left to the right. So if it's going this direction, that is uphill. It's going this way, that is downhill. This is following the alignment. It's a very gentle downhill grade. It'll be denoted with a negative, of course. These, since we added them, will be one at a time. All these sag ones, since I added them at once, they all come in as a group. So vertical alignment sag curve label group. See how I grab one, they grabbed them all. I could delete them all at once. Don't want to do that, but I just showed you I could. Hit Control Z again a couple more times. Hopefully it doesn't crash my CAD. There we go. And it's just saying these take a little tidying up. They're hard to squeeze in sometimes. Sometimes they need to be drug to different directions. Sometimes they can be drug into a drag state with this label. You might need to perfect how it looks, but there's a lot of information on 1 liter about that vertical curve of the profile. All the similar data just kind of stacked. Here's our grade break. This is at the end of the alignment. It's just saying the station and elevation at a given spot on the profile. So those are the 4 types of labels we added. The curves, vertical crest and sag, grade breaks right here, and lines, percentage grade along the lines on the profile. So there we go. We'll move to creating and applying profile label sets on a 159. So essentially I'm going to take what I did on this Jordan Court one and apply it to the Logan Court, which is right here, small one. So I previously named it something in this one, so I'll go to the new file. I named it Aaron's favorite band. I'm going to go to file 5, profile label set. Let's go to this, pick Jordan Court profile. Let's go to the profile view properties. I almost went to the profile again. And at this point, we have our bands. Excuse me, I did the opposite there. We want to go to the profile, not the profile view. We want to get the labels on the profile, not the profile view. So I got it selected. My contextual ribbon comes up. Profile properties, select there. Or right click, okay. My mistake. Once again, let's go back one more. So I have this profile selected. I want to go to the labels. I even get a little confused on this sometimes. We're going to profile labels, profile view, and the profile itself. This is the line itself, modifying and editing it, criteria. This is the labels over here. This is the view. These are analysis tools. This launch pad, are various things you can do to link things together, draw things in profile view, link it corridors, etc., etc., add things to it. So this takes a little bit to master, bounce between all these, but we'll edit profile labels. There we go. This is where we want to be. And we're going to say save label set. And I just quickly did it here for you. We're going to label the curves, graves, and breaks. The 3 common things to be labeled on a profile. Hit OK, that is saved. Hit OK again. Let's zoom out. Let's hit escape to clear my selection. I don't want that selected anymore. Let's go down to Logan Court. Not select the profile view. Let's select the design profile, not the existing ground dash red one. Let's select the design one. Let's this time go to right click,
and we go to edit labels. This is probably the quicker way to go to it. Possibly you get a little confused with all this ribbon stuff. It's possible. The right click I prefer sometimes. And instead of repopulating all this, it's a blank slate. We can just say import the one we just made, which is this one. Okay, okay. It'll apply my grade breaks, beginning and end, and it'll apply my line percentage grade sort of profile label. So let me pick it. Vertical alignment line. There's just one. It's just one simple line. Want to, you can do the same on this one here for Madison Lane, which is our other subdivision road. Just go here, right click, go to edit labels, or up here, edit profile labels, import label set. Okay, okay. It adds them all in, and there's some prettying up to do, some lipstick to put on this pig, but it's mostly ready. Moving fast. Let's go to our 6th drawing, profile view labels, and we're going to learn a couple more profile view labels that are directly only tied to our profile view. What does that mean? It means there's useful labels, a couple of them, they're applied to the entire profile continuously, right? Like our labels of our geometry we just did here. But there's some that you might want specific to your view. So in certain situations, you might just need to provide an annotation in your profile view, say this one, that isn't related to any other profiles. So you might have, I have 2 profiles going on here, my existing and dashed, and my design in the solid white. I might want some labels that that are not connected to any of them. They're only connected to the elevation and the Y and the station and the X and whatever else. I might have to put somewhere in here saying at this station elevation I have a utility crossing underground. So these labels are independent of the profiles. There's certain situations where that's good on these profile view labels. You might use it to like say where a culvert is and it stays static as long as your alignment's dialed in. If your alignment moves and your profiles move, the label will stay in the same spot, so it's dumb in that way. It won't move necessarily with this, but let's see what happens when we mess with these. So this drawing should have started by zooming in here. I zoomed all over the place on Jordan Court profile in this area on the picture of 161. So yeah, there's a PVI where the road tides in the edge of the existing road. You can see this sharp little ditch here. This is the existing road edge. Probably a crown here. It's crowning into a ditch. This ditch is shown really sharp because we're in a very vertically exaggerated in the Y direction here. And we're continuing on to a new drive we're making. So this is the tie to the existing road here. This is our drainage ditch. And we're going to click one of the grid lines in this profile view, for example, to get these profile view labels started. So I'll click it. We have 2 options here. Profile view labels, station elevation, and depth. In this case, while holding down the shift key, well, first let's pick our station elevation. We're going to do this one. And then it gives me some interesting directions here. While holding down the shift key, right click. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing. It wants us to just do hold the shift key, right click, and just say endpoint only. We're getting a one-time object snap, remember. We hold shift plus right key. That overrides any running object snaps we have. We get what running object snaps we have in our toolbar, our tool tray that we use most frequently on, but in this case I just want endpoint on. So let's click the center of the circle right here. And let's click it again in the same exact spot. So you got to click once for the station and once for the elevation. So now I'm specifying the elevation in the Y. Kind of tricky. I'm going to hold shift plus right click again to say only endpoint O snap. Kind of tricky. And I'll select there.
Didn't quite do it. There. Make sure you got that box going. The box or square, that means it snapped to the endpoint. I hit escape. And it's overlapping. This label's in a weird spot. So I'm going to hit escape twice to clear any selections. So we're going to pick it, and we're going to use the square grip to drag it up here, just so we have a station elevation label. And that's static to that spot on our profile view. So if our profiles change, this label will not change. I'm pretty certain. It's been a while. Let's give it a shot. Nope, it doesn't. So I changed my profile and that stayed the same. But in this case, that's good because this existing ground should not change. That's a pretty static thing. Our design might change. I just moved our ditch for whatever reason like this. Not ditch or new road. But this is a good one that probably will always stay there and be relative to the existing ground as it is on the earth. So that's how that works. Let's select the label. With it selected, we have a contextual ribbon that comes up with this label, just for station elevation. We're going to say edit label text right up here. Or we can right click and say edit label text here as well. And similar other properties we see here as we see here, as we've learned a few times by now. And in this case, we're going to go to the top and really follow the picture on page 162. Right here, it really kind of explains it in a little better detail, what it should look like. This is deep in the matrix of the text of this label, and all kinds of little hidden formattings you can do. Get pretty tricky in here. That more advanced users know how to manipulate this area pretty well to their needs, but that's where we're going to add that. I'm going to type it now and then restart on my pause on my video. Back again, I just put that in there, typed it, and we'll hit OK. After I type that in, it adds that text, which is pretty cool. So another thing, if you want to turn these mean there was an override done. One thing, I can select my labels. I get certain contextual prompts, so I don't get what I need here. This is really buried. This is a new thing after Civil 3D 2020 or 2018, excuse me. You go to the Annotate tab, and on the override GIF, this could be in a different spot in 2018, but it's within the Annotate tab. Say hide label override GIF. I don't want to see those. But if you wanted to know what was overridden, those would help you see that quickly. I overrid this label because I added text to it. That's why that GIF warning showed. So some people might like seeing those. I usually don't. Move this same grip, similar grips that we've seen on other labels. Reset it here. You can move the leader with this diamond upside down. You can reset it back here. So on and so forth. You can move the key node here, which that's the dynamic one. Your station elevation move around, see? Only relative to the section, the profile view grid, not to the profiles. These lines are the profiles, the grid is the profile view. Don't forget that part. That's kind of tricky to remember. So we have this label. We're going to start by going to the profile view grid again. And we're going to add a different label. And this time the only other option is depth. So I can select it this way after selecting my profile view. We can also do it my favorite way is to just have this open for a while, especially if we're adding a lot of labels. Or you can right click, go to recent input, and add another label here. These are up to your last 20 inputs. See, it says profile view. I'll add another label. So there's a few ways to do things. Recent commands are nice if you're doing it over and over again for a while. My favorite one too is to go to the Annotate tab and just open this up, and you can pick it as you go. This way, all the Civil 3D objects to annotate, or you can go down here like this, go into profile views, Here we are. Same ones. Too many spots, really. Almost too many spots, but preferably just leave it open by clicking it right here and go to, profile view. Now you have the same ones here as well. Then you can just leave this running while you add it up. I might have to add 20 labels and I want this open for a while, so I don't have to keep repeating. Let's go to add. And let's click a point at the invert of the V-shaped ditch and then pick a point just above it at the top of the ditch. So let's pick our profile view. In this case, we're going the backwards way of the book a little bit. Pick my first point. I'm going to turn on F3. Let me check my O snaps before I do anything. Let me turn some on. I'm just going to turn a bunch of them on. These are running O snaps. They'll stay here until I say otherwise. Now I have my O snaps on. I probably turned too many on. Paste the zoom in. We got too many on. I shouldn't turn midpoints. That's an endpoint O snap, object snap. Pick that one. I'll pick a second point up here. Let's turn on F8 command or the ortho mode by selecting it. So I only go in 90 degree. It doesn't seem to affect this as much. So let's just get close here like so. It's close enough. 0.9, I'm going to hit escape. That shows the depth. Why is that important? Why can't you just say, oh, I'm going to measure that? Use an inquiry tool. If you go to analyze, use your measuring tools here and analyze tab inquiry, you can measure it. I get it, but profile views have vertical exaggeration a lot of times. So this one is a vertical exaggeration of, let me check the style, 10. So that means the Y direction is 10 times fictitious. So really, if you measured this realistically, I just did a distance command. My distance is way off. Sometimes it pays to turn your O snaps off so it doesn't snap to weird things. It's 9 some feet. See that? How my distance is actually 10 times what it really is. So that's the vertical exaggeration for you. This 0.94, that's the true depth of the ditch. This is the vertical exaggeration depth. So this is wrong, but it's exaggerated vertically. So these labels come in handy to show the true distance even with the vertical exaggeration. Okay, so that's helpful sometimes. Well, let's go to the last section of this chapter and start projecting objects to profile views, which is pretty handy. So sometimes we need to project objects to profile views that aren't exactly just profile views or profiles exactly. We might need to project things like underground pipes or overhead cables nearby, trees, fences, different obstacles, other ditches, rock faces. So for projecting linear objects, that's easy. But keep in mind, if we're going to project, let's say, a fence across here, and it's like this, onto a profile view, this profile view runs parallel with this alignment. So if this projected object that crosses our profile view in alignment is not parallel with it, meaning it's not going this general direction, it's going to be distorted. This is more parallel-ish. This one is going to show in kind of an odd little squiggly line across. That's just because it's not parallel with the alignment and profile. You just got to keep that in mind with some objects. They're not always going to go parallel. For linear objects that are drawn in 3D, it's easy. They will draw our 3D for, say, a 3D polyline or a feature line or a survey figure. Those, or even similar objects, those three are typical. They'll show up on here in the right elevations. For 2D objects, we have to have elevations provided. In 2D objects, generally it's just one elevation. Sometimes it's not, lines being one. The elevations can be derived from a surface or a profile. So we can snap them up from a profile to snap them to it, or from a surface like this surface here. Projecting blocks and points are a little different, but very similar. AutoCAD points, Civil 3D points, and blocks, AutoCAD blocks.
blocks or drawings within drawings essentially. They're handled a little different than linear objects. They're represented with a marker, and they project away and they draw into the plan view. Okay, so they draw into this plan view here, but you do have the ability, the main thing is to assign elevations to those projections, just like linear objects, which we're about to do, but you can provide that elevation manually, so you can really set it in its own spot. And this allows you to kind of specify the elevation graphically or numerically. So independent of a surface profile, we're not going to do too much of that. It lets you basically insert a block here, and it can stretch vertically and do various things. So we're going to just add something a little simpler. We're going to click this Jordan View Profile View Grid, and there's some other options here. So we're going to pick project objects in the profile view on the ribbon. So right here, we can superimpose another profile from another profile view. They have to be parallel, otherwise, just like anything, if any of these things, parts from water pipe network or other objects that are 3D objects, lines, 3D polylines, feature lines, survey figures, or other profiles, all three of them, if they're not somewhat parallel to the alignment profile, they're going to show up in kind of a weird spot you wouldn't expect possibly, because they're not running parallel with it. They'll cross it in a weird way. So just keep that in mind once again. So let's say select objects. It's saying which objects do I want to add to the profile view. Well, let's go see what we want to add, and it is the blue line water pipe that runs parallel to the eastern property line. So let's find that. Oh, I made a mistake. I don't think I'm in the right drawing. Let's make sure you're in the right drawing. Object projection right here. I believe this. Yep. Okay. Now I have that line in there. So you might be in the wrong drawing. Easy to do. That line's not on. It might be frozen, but I'm going to just go in the right drawing here. The object projection. There's the blue line I want. Turn back my icon on with F8. Let's go back here, project objects to a profile view after I had selected it. Now I want to select set objects. Here's what I want. Hit enter. Give it a second. This is the dialog box you want to see. So I had to hit enter. I almost wanted to click the profile view, but you had to hit enter. So it's a 3D polyline. So in its style, I want to go to basic. Make it show up different ways. This is some fun stuff to play with. It's elevation option. I wanted to go to use objects. This one we could probably set to both. There we go. Let's hit OK. And let me hit escape so we can see it. You can see the water line did project. It's a 3D poly with many nodes. It followed in here. It's probably like a 1 or 2 inch water line underground. You can see it's projecting in here. That's pretty cool. That helps us do some design inferences, draw our road properly, have the correct distances here for coverage, the water line doesn't freeze, various things like that. So let's pick the profile again, and let's go back again to project objects to profile view on the ribbon. Give it a second. Let's look for these bore locations. So these are bore location symbols. They're points that are going to get bored into the ground, and they are where you're going to take geo samplings. Let me pick one. I'm just going to pick more than 3. Let me pick a few of them. Just curious. 3, 4,
Let's do 5. Press enter. We have several of them. So they're COGO points. These are AutoCAD points. Not AutoCAD points, they're Civil 3D points. They're COGO points with point numbers. And on these, let's try setting these all at once. So in this one, let's set them all as test bore as a style. So these are a bunch of COGO points styles. At my company, we have hundreds of these, which is pretty cool. You can do different styles. This one's going to be test bore. They're all different symbols. So if we go in here and look at it, it's a symbol like this with other characteristics. We'll hit OK. That's set all of them. This one we're going to set, you can say where you want what style, how the COGO point looks in this case, and where do you want it to attach. You want to go to the EG, FG. Do you want to put a manual elevation? In this case, let's say use object. Let's use the object, which is this COGO point. It has its own elevation, which is pretty cool. We're going to say the bore style, that's fine. You can also do the label of it. That's really cool. Hit OK. It added these bore locations to my profile view, which is kind of neat. You might want that for whatever reason. And it added labels. It says bore station. That's where they're going to be along this profile view. That can be very interesting additional information added, not just manually, more automatically. So let's hit escape to clear the previous selection. We're going to do one more iteration of this, but we're going to go to Logan Court and do it. And down here we have one more bore. So we're going to add that to the profile view. But first we got to get the contextual ribbon. We can also probably get these on the modify tab, I believe. Not necessarily. These are modifying certain things with Civil 3D entities, and I don't think they're here either. Still, the best way is to click the profile view, get your contextual ribbon. You can always start typing in commands too to get close to this, but project object profile view. Let's go find that object. So I got my Logan Court. Oh, I did it wrong here. This is Madison Lane. Let's get Logan Court going. You got to pick the right profile view. Project objects to profile view. Let's go find set objects. It's telling you what to do if you don't know. Always give that a look when you can. Pick the object, enter. This time we're going to change things just ever so slightly, and we're going to say basic on that. But instead of use object on this, we're going to say go to EG on elevation option. Hit OK, bore's fine there. Give it a second. Let's see what it did. Should be a little different. So this time it attached to the EG. That's where it went. The red EG profile instead of the FG one or the finished grade, design, new, whatever you want to call it. So just some different options there. It also put a label saying it's station and elevation. There's some text conflict. You can maybe move some of these labels and various things. But all in all, that is the end of chapter 8. So we're a lot more of an expert on profile views, profiles, and labels, and all their associated friends.